welcome to a cozy little corner of the internet where we just talk about books and my thoughts and opinions and feelings on them. I'm August, this is Cozy Rosie Reads, and I am sharing a wrap-up for the first time in a very, very long time. I hope you all had a wonderful January. I managed to read 7 books, which is the most that I've read in a month in a year. Last year wasn't a wonderful reading year for me, so thank you so much for still being here. And for any new faces, I love to read anything that I find while thrifting, anything weird, surreal, bizarre, underrated especially. I love a lot of books that were written in the 90s, early 2000s, some classics. Like anything that is underappreciated, I probably want to read it. So welcome. I hope y'all can get really cozy and we will chat about some books. I have a collection of very fun books and I also listened to several audiobooks this past month. Let's get into it. So the first book that I read in January was After Dark by Haruki Murakami. I believe this is my third Murakami. I first read Dance, 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 and then I read Sputnik Sweetheart. This is a novel that takes place all in one night. The start of every chapter also has a little clock that tells you exactly what time it is. So it starts at 11:56 p.m. and then goes until the wee hours of the morning. And each chapter is bouncing between characters. This takes place in Japan and it's translated by Rubin. Every chapter follows a different character. And we open up this story in a Denny's. It is very late at night. There's a young woman sitting at a table by herself reading, and then she's approached by someone who's a friend of her sister. And we're immediately through their dialogue getting backstory as to who her sister is and their relationship with each other. Since I read this at the beginning of January, I'm very vague on the character names, so I apologize. I don't remember everyone's name, but Mari is the young woman in Denny's who's reading a book, and then she is approached by, I can't find his name, a young man who's friends with her sister, Ari. Mari is a little bit more withdrawn, a little bit more introverted, and then we bounce to this very ominous perspective, and it follows this young woman sleeping in bed, but she's being watched. Someone is surveilling her. And this wouldn't be a Murakami novel if there wasn't this element of mystery, of this surrealism, this teeter-totter between reality and the subconscious. We then follow Mari as she is pulled to assist a Chinese girl who is in danger. She's been beaten up pretty badly, and this is because Mari speaks Chinese. And from there, a lot of little events happen, all in the span of one night. But it's obviously a night that's very different than the rest. It is something that's odd, and there's like this feeling in the air, and there are a lot of references in here to music, jazz clubs, classic artists, as she bounces from like restaurants to bars and to love hotels. So there's a lot that happens. There are a lot of characters that we're introduced to and that Mari is introduced to, while there's also this very sinister thing happening in this woman's bedroom. So we're getting a lot of different perspectives, and through this chronological span of time, we're gaining a lot of insight into everyone's movements. Where are they at this time of night? And a crime happens. So what is happening with that crime? We're then following the perpetrator. So it was very interesting and very intriguing. It is definitely not my favorite Murakami that I've read, and I really didn't think much about it afterwards. If you follow me on Goodreads, I don't really rate books anymore, but this one was, it just kind of went in one ear and out the other. I didn't have a lot of tantalizing thoughts that I wanted to linger on. It didn't bring a whole lot of emotion out of me. So for that, it didn't really rank highly in my head, but I just love Murakami's writing style. There's something about the translation. It just flows really, really well. It's very beautiful to read and very accessible. So if you're interested in Japanese literature, I definitely recommend giving Murakami a go. I mean, he's all over BookTube. If you watch BookTube and are familiar with BookTube, Murakami is a very ubiquitous author, but I'm really excited to read more Murakami in my future. Unfortunately, this one just didn't stick with me. I kind of wanted it to be a little bit weirder, a little bit scarier, a little bit spookier. There are certain scenes in Sputnik Sweetheart that I still feel. I think about the scenes and the writing and I can feel it. So I'm kind of looking for that a little bit more, some more bizarreness. You know, full send, make it very odd. That would be wonderful. So that is the first book that I read. All right, let me consult my little handy dandy notebook here. But the next book I finished was actually Sweetbitter by Stephanie Danler. So this is a book that has been around for a long time and I've been intrigued by it for so long, mainly because of the cover. It's so stunning. And this follows a young wayward woman as she enters the restaurant industry for the first time in her life. It's a very popular restaurant and it has hierarchies. It follows in and out every day in the restaurant. So it's very insular. It isn't really following her home. We're not really getting context of her family. She starts to get interwoven into this love triangle, and it's all about these very shallow relationships that we can have with our fellow coworkers. It's something that it binds you. It's so deep and meaningful, and you feel like you can trust them, but outside of the workplace, is there really a reliable relationship there? And I love that this really is just everyday activities, everyday things that are happening, everyday conversations. This author gives a lot of very short, almost like you're sitting in a room and you're just picking up on everyone's conversation. So you're just getting little bits of dialogue completely out of context. And I actually really enjoyed listening to this. I flew through it as an audio version, and I highly recommend it if you're looking for a very fun audiobook that doesn't have a lot of plot. There's not a lot of things happening. It is very slow moving in the sense that it's just literary fiction, a lot of lists, being in the culinary world and having to work in such a like strict but also very sexist workplace and falling into very strange relationships. The characters that she's around are so cruel in a very normalized way. They make fun of each other, they go out partying, there's a lot of drug usage. It's this very unstable and chaotic work life. And having that job in the restaurant industry is prone to chaos, and it's prone to a lot of very tricky, sticky relationships. And I thought it was just done really well. I know that there's a TV adaptation of this as a show, which I'd be really curious to watch after reading it, but I really enjoyed listening to it. It was such a wonderful book to start the year off on, something that was easy and fun and entertaining without there being high stakes. It was very low stakes, and we're just following this very wayward woman, which is something I absolutely love reading about. Also, I am filming as the sun is setting, so I'm gonna have to turn on a lamp pretty soon, but this vibe is just so nice. This like warm winter light coming in right now. I absolutely love it. The next book that I read in January was, of course, The Princess of Cleves by Madame de LaFayette. This edition is translated by Nancy Mitford, and this was originally published in the late 1600s. And I have a whole vlog where I talk about my experience reading this, and I cannot express how much I loved this book. This is by far my favorite book that I read all month. Sorry, I had to shift a little bit. My legs are going numb sitting here. But Princess of Cleves follows a young woman who is introduced to a French court. She's 16 years old. She's absolutely gorgeous. Her mother introduces her to the French court, full of French royalty. We have princesses, princes, queens. We follow her as everyone falls in love with her. So if you want a much bigger recap of this book, because there is a major plot twist that completely took me by surprise, I highly recommend that vlog. I had so much fun reading this. This was the first book in a long time that actually had me laughing out loud and annotating so much, and I was so engaged. The writing style is older, but it is so accessible and so fun. I cannot express how fun this was. You're just filled with so much like tension because there are so many passive-aggressive remarks. You're not able to forthright say that you like somebody or that you want to spend time with them. It is all so secret and mysterious. You have to like read between the lines when people speak to you. There's prim and proper ways that you conduct yourself, especially as a woman. And she's caught in, once again, like a love triangle. So it is a romance, but on top of that, it's also just everyday life in this court. How everyone communicates is mainly through gossip and pettiness, and everyone's spreading rumors about each other, and it is just so fun, just very delicious. I really enjoyed it. I had so much fun with this. I highly recommend it, especially if you are interested in getting into more underrated classics, or if you want to read more books that were published in the 1600s, for example. This is such a wonderful book. It was very easy to read. It follows a lot of actions, mainly so-and-so did this, and then they went and did that. Because of that, they did this. So there isn't that like stereotypical classical literature language of like very purple prosy and hard to understand. I just absolutely loved it. I'm so happy and lucky and glad that I read this month. It blew me away, and I love it so much. I hope I can read more books like this year that just sweep me off my feet and I become so engrossed. It was so much fun. Okay, I think it's time for me to turn on a light. My heat also kicked on too, so now I have a little bit of like a glamour moment with this vent right here. So 1 second. Wow, that light made a really big difference actually. So the next book I read is Chrome Yellow by Aldous Huxley. This is my second Huxley. Huxley wrote Brave New World. This is a very underrated work of his that I story. Cannot recommend enough, although there were some very outdated language, so just be cautious going into that. But this follows a group of aristocratic artists. They clearly come from privilege, they clearly come from this bourgeoisie lifestyle, and they meet at a mansion, at a manor, for this like summer of art and connection and meeting with each other and talking. It is so incredibly satirical. There is a section in this book that I still think about today where one of the characters, who's a writer named Mr. Barbecue Smith, he is a famous author in this world, and he is trying to take this younger writer under his wing. So in this group, we have quite a few different characters. Some are painters, some are writers, some just really like to be around the art world, and they pride themselves on being intellectuals, of being above and superior to everyone else. And if everyone else had the mindset we had, we'd be a better society because we're full of culture. So that's the setting. But as Mr. Barbecue Smith is taking this one younger character under his wing, he says, "Now let me tell you, I've never told anyone this, but can I tell you what the biggest thing that helped me write my novel was?" And the younger character is like, "Yeah, please tell me, I'm trying to write, like I'll take anything you give me." And he goes, "Have you ever heard of inspiration?" And he talks about inspiration as if it's this novel idea of being inspired. Write when you're inspired. When you write when you're inspired, oh my gosh, you can write so much. And you can write an entire novel in an evening if you have inspiration. So every time I write, I try to have inspiration. And it is just so tongue-in-cheek. It is making fun of itself. It's making fun of the art world, which oftentimes can be a very privileged world. And it's making fun of these characters. Of course, our younger character starts falling in love with a woman who's there. And it's just filled with these like very bizarre relationships. But there are sentences in here that really struck me even listening to it as just very, very beautiful and very insightful, what it's like to live the life and have the mind of an artist. It is a very specific feeling where everything around you is romanticized, but it's also very cruel. You can see the beauty and the grief in everything, and I thought that that was actually done really, really well. But for the most part, these are very gregarious characters. They're very out there, and I thought it was really, really fun to read. So if you're interested in reading a lesser known Huxley, I highly recommend Chrome Yellow. I thought it was really well done, and I love the descriptions of like a summer spent in this like castle and having festivals and picnics with fellow artists. That landscape is just so beautiful to me, and I really, really enjoyed it. Next, I read How to Be Both by Ali Smith. This is a novel that, thanks to one of you on my last video, commented that there are editions of this where, because the novel is split into two parts, two different perspectives, some editions have different starts. So you start with a different character than what I started with. So it's flipped, it's randomized. I didn't know that. So thank you so much for sharing that information. I think that was really, really interesting. This story follows a ghost as they are plummeted into modern day society from when they grew up in the 1400s as a classic painter. They're somebody who studied the greats and worked their way up and did these beautiful murals inside cathedrals and was a very renowned painter. But upon landing in modern society, they become attached to somebody, and we're trying to understand why and what's happening, and through that we're getting the backstory of this artist, Francesco. What I loved about this book is that it plays with pronouns so much, and especially with even the title, How to Be Both, it talks a lot about the gender differences between male and female, he and she, like who are these characters? There's a lot of playfulness when it comes with pronouns and a lot of secrecy and ambiguity that was very, very refreshing. I love Francesco's story. I love the historical fiction elements. I love the backstory of growing up in that time being an artist. As you can sense, maybe there's like a theme happening here. I really started leaning into my interests and my favorite genres this year. I love reading about art and being in the art world, so I really leaned into that this year, and might as well. Like, why not read something that I know I'm interested in, such as the art world? The second half of the book, at least in my edition, I believe it follows the person that we were attached to with Francesco, and it's talking about their backstory, losing their mother, the sadness, the grief, the heaviness that comes with it, why she passed away, and the connections they had, and the mystery that will always be around it. It was very beautiful, and I annotated quite a lot, But unfortunately, upon closing this book, it just didn't linger with me. I didn't have any remaining feelings. I didn't think about it again. And for me, a new favorite of all time is definitely one that it lingers with me. It stays with me. I think about it. It had a really positive impact on me. So while this was a really enjoyable reading experience, especially in that time period of the 1400s, the different ingredients used to create paints and the different expectations of artists then as well. Painting these frescoes and having to have very deliberate meaning. The biggest fresco that Francesco is working on is for a room that is called the Room of No Boredom. So it's a room that you will never get bored in. And I think that's absolutely amazing that now we use technology or phones to keep ourselves entertained, but back then it would just be looking at a wall, looking at paintings, getting lost in it, seeing a story, making up a story in your head. I really, really loved being in that world. So I'd love to find more novels that follow that kind of feeling. But overall, again, like I said, it just didn't linger with me, unfortunately, but I had a really fun time reading it and I'm really grateful I read it. Next, I listened to an audiobook called Everything Nothing Someone by Alice Carriére, and this is a memoir. I'm trying to get back into listening, especially audiobook versions, of doing fiction, nonfiction, fiction, switching every other. So this was my nonfiction pick, and this is a memoir that started out following Alice growing up in a household where her mother is a famous painter whose work is featured in the MoMA, and her father is a very famous actor. I believe in Germany. I can't remember exactly, but he's a famous actor. So growing up in this household, once again, that's filled with very out there characters who are very focused on their art and are very intellectual. There's more of a focus on art than nurture. And this was a book that, opening up, she's talking about her love of books and reading growing up and not having any friends in school, and just very relatable feelings. Starting the book, it felt like, oh, I do that. It felt very relatable. As the book progressed, though, this is a TMI book for sure. She does not hold back on describing the horrific things that happened to her, the horrific things that she's told as a child, the horrific things that she remembers her father saying to her, very incredibly inappropriate things, her struggles with addiction, her struggles with being put on so many different medication cocktails, being diagnosed with so many different personality disorders. So what started out as like, okay, yeah, like these are very relatable feelings for a child. It just got worse and worse and worse. And this is definitely a book that is full of trigger warnings, so definitely be cautious going into it. But it really is about what happens to a child who isn't nurtured, on not really having like a maternal relationship with your mother or having a very safe place to just exist. She lived in a very privileged lifestyle, and there was a section in this book where she accidentally broke a glass and just asked out loud, like, what do I do? Like, she has no idea how to actually do things, everyday tasks such as like cleaning up after herself, because the lifestyle she lives is just so different. I really enjoyed this audiobook, especially because it was TMI. There were definitely parts where it made me feel incredibly uncomfortable, but for that I also think that there's something very profound and beautiful in not understanding things and to really face that discomfort sometimes. I will say it just felt very long. I was like, how much more can we endure? How much more has this poor woman been through? And it was just a very, very fascinating memoir. I can't believe everything that happened to her. It was just so wild and out there and so different, and that's why I love reading memoirs, is to read from someone else's perspective, their whole life. It is just very, very sad how easily the trajectory of life can turn and change, especially in this modern world where, in order to be understood, sometimes it does feel like it comes with a diagnosis, especially when it comes to mental health crises. And a lot of times the solution for that is prescription drugs, and how easily you can just like lose your sense of self through different mental health issues. So this was like a very heavy book mentally and emotionally, and it's just so interesting being in that art community, in that art sphere. It is just so different. The amount of celebrities that would be at her house, and growing up spending summers in Europe, and it's just a very different lifestyle, and I really enjoyed reading it. So I highly recommend it, especially if you're a fan of I'm Glad My Mom Died or any sort of memoir like that, where there's just a lot of information about how brutal life can be sometimes and cruel. It was just very, very interesting. And the last book that I read, which actually I'm finishing up editing a vlog right now, so I'll be talking about it way more in depth in my next video, is The Blind Owl by Sadegh Hedayat. And this is translated into English by D.P. Costello. Hedayat is an Iranian author, and the back compares it to Edgar Allan Poe, where it's this dark, gothic, ominous, surrealist piece that you don't really know what's happening, and that is exactly that. You don't know which way is up in this book. You don't know where it's going or what is even real, and I find that so interesting. The first 50 pages of this book really, really gripped me, and I don't want to give too much away because I talk about it so much more in depth in a coming vlog, so please stay tuned. I loved that we had no idea what was real. Our character was descending into this delirium, this madness, and we were just dragged along with him. We follow this unnamed male character as he sees and falls in love with an unnamed woman, and he tries to track her down and find her, and it's through repetitive motifs throughout the whole book of an old man and a young woman that he becomes fixated on. There's just a lot of symbolism that you can put your own meaning into this book. It's a lot about despair and grief and desire, what it feels like to be so isolated and disconnected from society that you start to lose your mind, what even is human existence. There were a lot of things in here that I annotated, and I felt so incredibly deeply. I felt very seen by this book, oddly enough, which is a little scary, but that's what I love about it. You get to read things that you think, but just in such poetic, eloquent ways. So I really enjoyed the beginning of this, and then it just kind of started to teeter out for me. It didn't remain as strong. I didn't feel as much. It did feel a little bit repetitive for me, with the same motifs being reused, same phrases being used, and I just wish it did something a little bit extra, but it does have a little bit of like a turn ending. So there's still something to gain from this, but it is incredibly uncomfortable. There are trigger warnings, definitely, so please be sure to look into that before picking this up if you're interested, because it is very uncomfortable and very graphic, specifically around death and decay. So if you're not into that, I would definitely steer clear. I really loved how much open-ended, ambiguous symbolism was used in here. I feel like the reader can really attach whatever meaning they want to it, which I think is very impressive, and it's just so dark. This is a really dreary, dark book. The second half of the book is very inside our main character's head. It is very insidious. It's a lot of thoughts and thinking and not much action. So we start out with a little bit of action and some very surreal things happen that we can't quite tell if they're really happening or if they're happening in our main character's head, which I love. I want to question in literature. I want to question what is real and what isn't. So overall, this was an okay book. I didn't think about it again after I finished, but that just means I'm on the quest still to find a perfect book for me. So there we have it, my friends. Those are the 7 books that I read in January. I hope you enjoyed this video. I would love to hear what your favorite book of the month was. If you want to leave a comment and let us all know, that would be absolutely amazing. Can't wait to read more in February and do more regular wrap-ups. I love chatting about the books that I read in just like this very chill, hangout way. I had so much fun reading this month. I feel so renewed and reading so much this month and this year so far, and I really can't wait to keep reading. I have a new vlog coming soon. I'm so excited to share it with you all. But until then, thank you so incredibly much for being here, my friends. Definitely let us know your favorite book of the year down below, and I will see you very soon for my next video. Stay cozy, my friends. Bye!